I mentioned earlier I wanted to talk to you about Governor Christie and what he's up to. And there's a story here that connects to the thread that has run through all of today's program, all of yesterday's program, and frankly, all of the last, 13 years programs, or however long I've been doing this show. I think it's been 12 or 13 years, thereabouts. And so let me just jump into this. The editorial board of the New York Times on the 25th of June, 3 days ago, wrote an op-ed titled Governor Christie's Toxic School Plan. And they pointed out a scam that Christie is running and exactly how he's running it. And it's really pretty breathtaking. Right now, the Constitution of the state or the law of the state of New Jersey says that if a school district can't make it on the property taxes, that the state has to make up the funds so that the school can function. Now, the state funds have been pretty penurious to begin with, pretty short to begin with, and and as long as we have property tax-based school funding, it's like a guaranteed way of maintaining high levels of, at the very least, economic segregation, and consequential to that, racial segregation, because of the economic nature of racism in the United States and the economic history of racism in the United States. So basically poor and minority neighborhoods, and in New Jersey more often than not, those are the one and the same, would get more state funding than affluent suburban white neighborhoods that had a good, strong tax base and, plenty of local money to make their schools just as spiffy as they possibly can get. So what Christie has suggested is that the state, he wants to, quote, equalize, this is his word, equalize funding across districts, across school districts. He says, we want to pay $6,599 per student, $6,600 a student, to all districts in state aid. And then the rest of the cost of educating, this doesn't include, special ed funds, and then the rest of the cost of educating these kids is going to be picked up by the local school district through their property taxes. And his sales pitch to the half-educated Republicans in New Jersey, and frankly to the Democratic-controlled state legislature, has been, hey, what's wrong with everybody getting the exact same thing? It's $6,955 or $6,599. Every school district is going to get $6,600 per student, and they're all, they all start at the same place. And people go, oh, well, hey, that makes sense, without realizing that it costs more than that to educate a child in New Jersey. It costs in some school districts a lot more than that to educate a child, in part because, oddly enough, ironically enough, in some of the school districts that are really, really having a hard time and have a lousy tax base, it actually costs more to educate kids in those school districts than it does in the fancy, expensive ones, because they're having to constantly do maintenance on their buildings. They're having to deal with problems of poverty as well as problems of education. And frankly, when I say it costs more, I probably should say it should cost more, because they don't spend more. They spend less, which is how we maintain this de facto segregation. It's no longer de jure. It's no longer segregation at law. It's segregation as a consequence of policy. And here's a policy that Christie, this is why he's going to make the perfect vice president for Donald Trump, because he's a mean, venal, angry man who doesn't give can't say it on the radio, who doesn't give a damn about poor people, and in fact, I would say, aggressively works to the interests of the elites at the expense of the poor, the working poor, and the middle class. I mean, that's Christie's calling card. And if you don't like it, he will yell at you about it because he's a tough guy. So the New York Times, they say, this is his deeply irresponsible proposal for stripping New Jersey's poorest communities of desperately needed education aid to fund property tax cuts for well-heeled suburbanites. They don't add mostly white. He says this. They say the New York Times says this toxic plan does nothing less than pit rich against poor, black against white, city dwellers against suburbanites, and it could well poison state politics for years to come, even if the Democrats succeed in fending it off. They say it sounds reasonable, flat amount, right? But it ain't. The New York Times writes, this is the editorial board of the New York Times, as Tom Moran of the Star-Ledger of Newark reported last week, the proposal would gut the New York school system, which relies on the state for about 85% of its budget. The district would have to cut more than half of its budget, which would clearly mean firing staff and closing and shuttering schools. Wealthier districts, meanwhile, would get more state aid because they're not getting that $6,900 right now because they don't need all that money because they've got all this, local tax base, property tax base. Wealthier districts would meanwhile get more state aid so that they could cut local property taxes. No one in education policy could credibly defend a flat formula because children in different communities have different needs. But Christie wants to do it. Now, the reason I mention this, and the reason why I say, this is a thread to everything else, is this Applejack is one of the posters over at Democratic Underground. And in reply to a thread about Glenn Greenwald and the Brexit narrative from Sunday, the 26th, Applejack wrote, and I quote, I recall a conversation I had with one of the Hanford nuclear waste site activists back in the early 1990s. He told me that as the cancers climbed and the local economy fell apart through the 1970s and the full scope of pollution on the Hanford Reservation in Washington state became known, many hate groups and fringe activists attempted to leverage the issue to their own ends. The KKK recruited there on the basis that the nuclear waste was due to Jewish bankers. Stormfront types said in local meetings that the USA cared more about giving welfare to black people in cities, black urbanites, than helping rural white people. LaRoucheites said whatever nonsense they always say. The Revolutionary Communist Party said that capitalism depended upon poisoning the working class, etc. And then, so basically, okay, you got a crisis, and then the bigots come in and say, ha-ha, the crisis is caused by them. Caused by the Jews, it's caused by the Hispanics, it's caused by the blacks, it's caused by the gays, it's caused by women, it's caused, And Applejack writes, I see the failure of modern Western neoliberal entities as a similar moment, but on a global scale. If we don't fix the underlying issues, the racists and xenophobes will definitely make hay of it. And that's what we saw with this Brexit vote. End of quote. Now it's me speaking, and tip of the hat to you, Applejack. That's what we saw with this Brexit vote. And that's what we're seeing right now with much of, frankly, the Trump campaign. And it's like, we've got to get real about this. We've got to call this out. We've got to help people understand that it's not Muslims and it's not Mexicans that are causing the economic problems in this country. It's Trump's colleagues.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the Republican Party. It's neoliberal ideology. It's the corporate elite. We'll be back.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.